Hello, and welcome back to General Science. Today, we're going to be talking about cell division, following up our video about the cell parts and what cells are made out of. And the two major processes of cell division are mitosis and meiosis. So we're going to be talking about both of those today. So first of all, we need to know why cells divide. And the main reasons are for growth, repair, and reproduction. Those are the three major reasons why a cell will divide itself. And so they can grow larger, repair, or so they could reproduce, make a new copy of themselves. The first way a cell does this is called mitosis. And that's when organisms grow by the addition of cells. So for instance, when you're getting bigger, when you're growing up, that's through a process of mitosis. In a multicellular organism, some of these cells are going to perform functions that are different from other cells. So in our bodies, right, we have certain cells that do certain things, like the lungs have certain cells that do things that lungs do, and hearts have different types of cells. So mitosis can create a range of different types of cells based on what cell is splitting. So the process of a cell becoming different is differentiation, and that's what happens when a cell specializes. So under a normal condition, once an animal cell becomes specialized, it can no longer form an entire organism. Okay, so if you take a heart cell, you can't grow that heart cell into a human being. Okay, however, plant cells are what are called totipotent, and that means that you can take any cell from a plant and you could grow an entire plant from that cell. It'd be difficult, but it's possible. And that's what totipotent means. So when do cells divide? The most limiting factor is the size of the cell membrane. Right? Cells might have to be able to obtain nutrients, and as the volume of a cell increases, the cell surface area does not increase as greatly. So larger cells require larger surface areas for survival. So what's the difference between cell division and nuclear division? Cytokinesis is the actual division of a cell into two new cells. Mitosis, however, is the division of the nucleus of the cell into two new nuclei, and those are two different things. Sometimes cells are going to go through mitosis without actually going through cytokinesis. So sometimes cells will divide their nuclei without creating a new cell, without splitting into new cells. That's an important distinction to know when you're talking about cell division. Here's some terminology we're going to need to know if we're going to talk about cell division. The first word being chromatin, and that's a thin, fibrous form of DNA and proteins. So it's just a form that DNA can take during cell division. Sister chromatids are the identical structures that result from chromosome replication. Okay, so that means that it's a copy of a chromosome. So when a chromosome replicates, the sister chromatid would be the identical form that's been created from that replication. This is generally how we represent chromosomes. As you can see, chromosomes are made up of different parts. There's a P arm and a Q arm. The P arm is the shorter one, and the Q arm is the longer one. The centromere is the point in the center, and that's where those chromatids are joined together, so they combine those chromatids together. And a telomere is a tip of a chromosome, so it's the end cap of a chromosome that's kind of holding it together. You can think of it as kind of like a knot at the end of a long rope of DNA. So that's what a chromosome looks like. Obviously, this part right here, this is a side view, and this is from a top-down view. So it's kind of like a long cylinder of DNA. So how do cells divide? Well, they go through something called the cell cycle. Okay, and it's a sequence of phases in the life cycle of a cell, and it's a continuous cycle. As you can see, right, it can continue going for as long as it needs to, and sometimes cells stop and they go off and they stop dividing, right? But it's a long different thing, right? You got the S phase, which is where you make new sets of DNA. There's a gap where the cell gets ready. There's the actual mitosis part, another gap, and then it starts all over again. So the cell cycle has two main parts. The first part is the growth and preparation, which is called the interphase, and then the cell division part, which is mitosis and cytokinesis, right? Mitosis being the division of a nucleus, and cytokinesis being the division of the cell. So interphase, this is what occurs between divisions, and it's the longest part of the cycle. There's 3 stages to interphase, and it lasts a long time because it takes a lot of energy and resources to split a cell in two. So it'll take a long time, right, to get ready to do all of its splitting. So let's take a look at interphase. The first part of interphase is G1, or gap 1. And this is when the cell has just finished dividing. So in gap 1, the cell is recovering from mitosis. It's getting used to its new environment and what happened during division, and so it's kind of recovering. So it just went through a big strenuous process, and now it's kind of sitting on the couch waiting to get going again. The next part of interphase is the S phase, and that's the synthesis stage. It's when DNA is going to replicate, right? So to make a new cell, you have to replicate the DNA. Every cell needs to have a new set of DNA. So that during this phase, you're going to make the new set of DNA for that new cell. And then finally, the third phase of interphase is called G2, or gap 2. And this is the part where you prepare for mitosis. You're going to create more organelles. You're going to grow the cell larger so that when it splits, each cell has the same amount of stuff. It's just getting ready for that division. Now, all of this part, if you're going to look at it, this is in hours here, right? All of this can occur in about 16 hours. That's not a whole lot of time, but as you can see, 15 of those 16 hours is dedicated to preparing for this division, and then the division process only takes about an hour. So the prep really is necessary to make the actual division successful. Okay, so mitosis is the actual division part, and it begins after G2 and then it ends before G1. So in this map here, you can see G2 ends, you go to mitosis, and then G1 is at the end. And mitosis is broken up into stages as well. It's got a prophase, a metaphase, an anaphase, and the telophase. These phases are the major phases of mitosis, and they're important to know. Prophase is when chromosomes are going to condense, the microtubules are going to form, and the nuclear envelope is going to break down. So the nucleus is going to break apart, the chromosomes are going to condense into the form that they need to be in, and these microtubules are going to form. These guys are going to be important for this division. They're going to help the DNA split. In the metaphase, chromosomes are going to be pulled to the center of the cell, and they're going to line up in a line. Now, this actually happens in real time. We've got footage of chromosomes being lined up in this specific way. These microtubules are going to pull on them until they're lined up perfectly, and it does this all on its own. Okay, there are some proteins that help that happen. Then next in the anaphase, the centromeres are going to divide. So basically the fibers pull on the chromosomes and pull them apart. And so now each side of the cell is going to have one full, complete set of DNA. That's why this precise alignment is so critical. If they're not aligned correctly, you might not get the right amount of DNA on each side. And then finally in telophase, the nuclear envelopes reform around the chromosomes, and the chromosomes begin to reform into just how DNA forms normally. And then the last part is cytokinesis. And that's when, in animal cells, that's when the plasma pinches and it forms into these two new cells, so they kind of squeeze off. In plants, there's an elongation, and then the cell plate has to form in between the new cells, so the cell doesn't kind of spill apart. Now that we've gotten to the meiosis part of the slideshow, we're going to pause, and because we're going to split this video into two. So come back in a second, and you'll be able to see meiosis, the second part of cell division.